I'm Tom Nondorf, editor of American Cemetery and Cremation magazine. I have a very special roundtable discussion for you today. There's been a whole lot of noise, beautiful noise, about women in the death care space, especially the funeral profession. 3/4 of mortuary science students nationwide are women. I saw an item online that said in 1970, just 5% of funeral director program graduates were women. So just the span of my lifetime, the wave has become real. There's no denying it. Now I'm a cemetery guy in terms of what I cover mostly. And what I really want to know is how this wave can flow through the gates into the cemetery management space. Cemeteries might be even more resistant than funeral homes to change in some ways, but across the board, they have to embrace change if they're going to thrive in coming years. And part of that would be embracing this wave of women in leadership roles. We have examples of incredible women leaders in cemeteries. At Laurel Hill in Philadelphia, Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, now Cave Hill in Louisville, until recently at Congressional Cemetery. With us today, we have the innovative Robin Simonton, who's been for the past 14 years the executive director of historic Oakwood Cemetery in Raleigh, North Carolina. Someone who knows every aspect of running a cemetery day to day and knows a lot about the history of cemeteries. We also have the fearless Lisa Baue, who had the job and greatness of running a cemetery thrust upon her when she was just getting her footing in the business after the sudden death of her father. Since 2019, she's been finding ways to share her expertise, culminating with the new organization, Funeral Women Lead, on the board of Funeral Women Lead, but also Senior VP of Communications for Security National Funeral Homes and Cemeteries, is the very wonderful Melissa Posey Loose, who has worked in funeral service for over 25 years. Security National currently has a big program dedicated to supporting cemetery staffs and marketing, community engagement, and sales. She's a marvelous orator as well. In fact, all of these women, all three of them are published authors, successful speakers. So why am I talking so much, you might ask? Let's hear from these folks. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I want to start with Robin, who's currently, knee deep running a cemetery in every sense of the word. And I remember you telling me when we talked was earlier this year that there was a time it didn't even cross your mind that running a historic cemetery was even a career option for you. You thought it was just a man's deal. Did you feel like because what you have now done, younger people can come up and at the very least know that this is a viable career path for them?
Well, it's not like when you're in school, and I'm not a funeral director, but it's not like when you're in college, they're like, you could do this, you could run a cemetery. Had I known that, that's what I would have, done. But in all honesty, no, I didn't think it was a job that a woman could do. And I think that's some of the media and watching movies and things like that. When you don't grow up in the death industry, you only know what you know from seeing it on the big screen. But immediately after getting here, and you can see there's behind me, this side, I can't even point to that. There's a picture of a man. I'm doing that horribly. Behind me, the cemetery has always been run by men. Where I was, I'm the first female director in about 150 years. And I immediately got here, and people who had my job previously said, oh, I hear they hired a woman to run the place. I heard that a lot. And so, nothing in the beginning made me think that this was a job that people anticipated in Raleigh, North Carolina, being run by a woman. But very quickly, it was the female funeral directors of all age groups that reached out. And that has become this community of women that have, including the monument company folks, that have really supported each other. And it is an amazing thing. And while I'm not the only female director of a cemetery in my region, have relied on these female funeral directors and also female cemetery directors, some of whom you've noted in your introduction. These women were not competitors, we support each other. But no, 14 years ago when I started, and it was a big deal that there was a woman here for the first time in the place's history.
Now I feel that's a very interesting point in terms of what you dealt with, and sort of a lot of it's about validation, I imagine, on something, just learning and being able to pass that on to younger people now that you can say, hey, this exists now, and it worked for me.
Well, and I come from a Girl Scout background. That's where I worked. And so when I see these women of different generations supporting each other, I think, gosh, if we could teach young girls that today, that this is a field that supports each other, there's leadership roles, it would definitely help the next generation of young people seeing that these jobs are possible. I mean, even if I may be outside with the shovel on any given day, you just never know what you're going to do in a cemetery job. So.
Well, that fellowship is a big part of why I imagine Lisa and Melissa, you got together, and I feel in a weird way I was witness to history, because it was at the Cana conference last year. I was sitting, it was at the bar late one night. The conference, I think, was coming to a close, and I happened to see you guys at a table, and you got up and announced to whatever people there having drinks, we are going to change this industry. And no, you didn't say what it was about, but I thought, I just recorded that in my head. And I wondered if that was what became, those were the seeds germinating and became what we're talking about today in Funeral Women Lead. What sort of was the germination, that idea of giving back to people, to younger women in the space? I'll put that to Lisa.
Yeah, so talking about us, Melissa and I were also there for a late night just get together, because you know how busy it is when you go to these conferences, and I wanted to pick her brain on this little idea I had. I've been a funeral coach since 2019. A coach, it's actually a business coach in the profession, both funeral, cemetery, and cremation. But Dr. Alan Wolfelt thought it was a clever name to call me a funeral coach, so it stuck. And as Melissa and I were visiting, we were catching up on her life journey and some things going on in her business. And we've known each other for a number of years, since she's been with NFDA and helped really grow the Professional Women's Conference. And there's been something, inside of me for quite some time that I felt needed to come out to share my thoughts and feelings about women in this profession, and how we are still in the minority. Even though we have 75% graduating mortuary school, even the cemetery business, the pre-planning business, the funeral directing, you name it, cremation business, women are starting to grow, but they need more support. And Melissa and I were talking about what that support looks like. I was one coach to a small group of women, and mostly women, that reach out and say, I want to be an owner someday. I want to be like Robin someday. I want to be a cemeterian. I don't know how to get there. I want to buy a cemetery or a cremation company. What should I do? So Melissa and I were noodling a little bit over, I think, a little food and a glass of wine, and you guys were right next to us. And when we were done, we were like, yep, we can do this. This is doable. So that was a year ago, last September, right? And we're coming up on our birthday. We actually launched in March, but we were noodling in the fall of what to create and how to do this so we can better support women. We are going to become a 501c3. We will be a charitable organization very soon. We have a wonderful wellness summit and a women's leadership academy, never been done before, that launches this November 16th, arrival 17th through 19th. And you can go to funeralwomenlead.org and find out more information on what we're doing. I'm going to turn this over to Melissa a little bit, because she's one of our founding board members, and I didn't have to twist her arm at all. I just said, what do you think? What can we do? How can we better support women with ongoing community, with some programs such as a leadership development program, a wellness summit to work on our work-life balance and the things that sometimes we struggle with as women professionals. We care for everyone else. We don't always care for ourselves. But I'd like to get Melissa's perspective too, because she's been a huge part of where we are today from where we started off back in September.
Well, thanks. and Tom, it's your interview, so you jump in and ask me whatever you want. But I was really loved what Lisa was saying. I know there are some other groups that are out there that have created some communities, but this opportunity that Lisa's talking about definitely differentiated itself a bit, because there were some opportunities perhaps for a bit of funding behind it, and to put not just what's in conversation. and leaving it there, you know, into a community, but bringing it more to action, to actionable items where women really stand behind each other and walk holding hands, you know, in a journey to leadership. And I will say too, I loved it because Lisa had positioned an opportunity that was for women, but it wasn't necessarily all by women. We have lots of partners that have approached us in the space and even outside the space to say, hey, we recognize this effort. We see this. We want to stand with you and help get these women what they need to be successful. So to Robin's point, you know, to make that vision become a reality and to even let them know it's a possibility.
Right. And we hope to create a long, ongoing community of support. So there'll be niche groups such as cemeterians. And Robin, we'd love to have you join us where you can help coach some of these young women who want to get into the cemetery business. We're going to offer various things like mentoring and coaching programs, resources to reach out, to find leaders like Robin that we can connect you with, so that if you want to start a cemetery, you want to be part of a cemetery company, how does a cemetery actually run? You know, is this something I should consider as a career? These are things where we need resources and we need women to step up and help them and be their guides and mentors. You know, when I was a young, Becky mentioned when my dad died in 1987, 3 months before he died, he bought out his partner in the cemetery. My dad was a silent partner and he was a funeral director. Did not have a clue how to run a cemetery. I had been licensed for 8 years and boy, I had no idea either. And I shared this story with Tom. It's kind of a horror story. And it is in my book, Wake Up Calls. It actually just came out, and then we launched on the 3rd of September. So if anybody wants a copy, this has got a few failures and horror stories in it. Kind of what I did to overcome them with lots of help and lots of mentorship. Back when it was the American Cemetery Association, a good friend of mine took me and said, "You have to come. This is where you learn about cemeteries." But I had a cemetery. 80-acre beautiful memorial gardens. I had a staff of almost all men, a couple of women, and I had no clue what I was doing. And it was really scary. The cemetery financially was not in good shape. The endowed care funds were what they were supposed to be, but there were no marker trust funds, and they had marker payables that were huge. They had built mausoleums and had future mausoleum obligations, but no trusting in Missouri back in the day. So the money wasn't there. I said, well, how does this work? I said, well, somebody kept the money. I said, well, who would do that? Not put it into a trust, right? Well, the laws weren't there, so they used it for salaries and reinvested in the cemetery. Beautiful monuments and mausoleums. However, you got to have cash flow to run a cemetery, right, Robin? And you can't just rely on cash from opening and closings. And as you know, from a historic perspective, these historic cemeteries, unless their endowed care is really well invested and maybe you even double what the state requires, it's very difficult to live off of that and even expand off of that. We had about 40 acres undeveloped at the time, back in the 80s. So I learned the old-fashioned way, unfortunately, and I don't believe that that's the way any of us, men or women, should learn how to run a cemetery. I think we need to go back to school. ICCFA University has great courses. Do all the women interested in our profession know about that? So one of the things we're going to do at Funeral Women Lead is have a full resource center where we will connect you to a lot of the scholarship opportunities that are available to attend programs like ICCFA University, like Professional Women's Conference, so that you are able to fully develop yourself in a well-rounded, planned way. And we'll have people like Robin there to guide you. So that's our goal, is to create a large group of volunteers that will help other women grow themselves as leaders in the future, so that they don't have to go through disasters like trying to figure out how to make a cemetery profitable when they pick it up, right? Yeah, don't buy it if it's got a huge liability. So I didn't buy it. I operated it for many, many years. God bless my dad, but the funds weren't there and I don't know what he was going to do with it. So like most people in our profession, hopefully we're out there learning and understanding more what to do. I built a funeral home on the front of the cemetery and it's right off the interstate, and that helped a lot. That brought more people there. it also helped us grow, and we were very blessed to grow with our community. And I had a good team of people. Go out and hire people like Robin and Melissa and find those experts that understand the business. How do you do that? Where do you find them? Well, at Funeral Women Lead, we're hoping that we'll be able to have the resources to guide you. That's our goal.
Thanks. I want to poke at this idea of sort of the why. You know, people, it's kind of the latest thing. What is your why? You've heard that probably a million times now, but I know, and it's clear from what you say, the general why is, but I don't know if you have any sense of pushback. But one thing is that it's not, you know, you're not running counter to men for this or that, but it's an increase. It's another tool in the toolkit if you have more points of view, especially from people who've gone through something similar to you in the past. And talking to women, I found that one theme that recurred was ideas not being taken seriously, especially when they're trying something new and non-traditional. And I wonder if that's something any of you have run across in your career, or that strikes a note to say, yeah, this is part of it. Because I think a lot of when guys are learning about this or thinking, you know, why is this? These are 3 successful women, so do they really need an affinity group to pull them together? That they're already doing their thing. Right. But there's these little, you know, these little things that pick at the experience, and I'm curious, you know, what are the little moments like that? Do you have examples of that you've experienced?
You know, when I started, I was only 36, and it was a big change out here. And, you know, I started bringing life, no pun intended, to the cemetery and programs and events. And we're in the South. And, you know, I was told I wasn't mature enough, that, you know, whenever there was a newspaper story in the cemetery about the cemetery in town, you know, it was like, well, that maybe they had made the wrong hire. I heard that a lot. And, you know, those kind of things, you know, we're trying to put the cemetery out there. We're trying to, you know, as in a Victorian cemetery, trying to bring it back to what it was intended to be. And ultimately, you know, the pushback of, you know, it was hard for me not to be like, is this because I'm a woman? Or calling vendors for the first time, you know, the vault company, you know, and maybe I wasn't entirely sure I knew what I was asking for, you know, the first time. But they're, you know, and people are supportive, but it, you know, trying to change and being the first female in this role, and trying to change how people view the cemetery or how people utilize the cemetery was a challenge. And I remember when I took this job, my aunt said, you think you're going to be working less than at your old job? You know, you're a mother. How are you going to do this? In my first day, there was a car seat in the back of my car. I had an 18-month-old. And the superintendent, who had been here for 30 years, looked at me and said, you have got to be kidding me. You took this job and you have a child. And I thought, what have I done? Now, I mean, but so when I hear you say, you know, Lisa, work-life balance, you know, that is hard. It is hard in this industry. And my role is different than a funeral director, but it is still hard. And so those kind of things, you know, I heard that a lot in the beginning. And now I have a 15-year-old and he thinks this is the coolest place on earth, you know, but yeah, but you know, it does stick with you that, you know, maybe I wasn't the right person for the job because I was looking at it differently, or as a mother, I couldn't have done this job. And that, you know, I did it. I mean, it's sacrificed to my work-life balance. I'm always still trying to figure out a better balance.
That story totally resonates with me, Robin. I thank you so much for sharing that. You know, you might be able to hear my voice that while I live in Utah now, I'm from the South and I'm from South Carolina. But I heard frequently, and I don't want to out anyone too much on this, but inside and outside the walls of the funeral home, you know, comments about women in funeral service. And unfortunately, I still hear some of those today. Now, those voices are getting a lot softer because they're being overcome by voices that are positive, right, and are very welcoming. But there is still that sentiment out there about, you know, being a mother and how are you going to be able to do this as a funeral director? How are you going to be able to embalm if you're pregnant? How are you, you know, all of these kinds of things. And I will never forget, I was standing, it was one of my first funerals. No, I think it was actually a couple of years into being a funeral director. And you have to know, I wasn't a 20-year-old doing this. This was a second career for me. But I was standing there in my dark navy suit. You know, I couldn't have looked more traditional, except for my gender was different probably in my part of the country from what the people were used to. And I had a family walk up and say, "Now, where's the funeral director? I'm looking for the funeral director." And there I was standing there. So, you know, but I heard it just this week, actually a couple of days ago at one of our locations, that now I will say, let me back up and say, for the Security National Funeral Homes and Cemeteries, we do have lots of women and men. We have all sorts of people here, and very, very welcoming. In this one particular location, though, by virtue of just who's been there, it is predominantly male. And the one funeral director who is female said to me, "I just really appreciate you being here. They're great to me, they treat me well, but I'm still the only woman, and I do feel very different. And to have someone else to be here today and spend some time with me and coach me and mentor me has made all the difference." So I mean, we need that community. We have been considered the other for quite some time, and I've said this in many articles and interviews. You know, it's so interesting that we find ourselves here. It's a cyclical thing, right? Women were the keepers of the dead, the carers for the dead for so long, and then it became a business, and then men took that role, and now we're here. We're back at the table, reclaiming where we should be. We should have a place here with them. So.
And that's what we hope to support women with, Tom, at Funeral Women Lead. Part of the challenges is they're still having these very same stories that Robin and Melissa are sharing. Many of those occurred with me in my past as well. It's still going on. So the women that I've coached, the women that we've been around at various conferences are telling us that the inequities are still there. The pay scales are not what they should be for our gender in the profession. And they struggle with being developed and being promoted and learning how to speak for themselves in their self-confidence. So women are raised maybe differently in the home. There's lots of statistics showing how we were raised and differently than our male counterparts. Women, as Melissa said, need a community to support them. And as their young mothers, I was 30 years old when my dad died. I had a 4-year-old at home and hadn't even had my daughter yet. I've hauled babies around the funeral home. I've hauled them out to the cemetery in back car seats. You know, you just run around. Sometimes when your babysitter's sick, you don't have a choice. That baby's got to come to work with you. And a lot of employers aren't making that possible today. We're finding that women are struggling finding the flexibility that they need in their schedules to be able to be a mom and a funeral director or a cemeterian or a cremationist. I constantly have women coming up and sharing with their stories that are saying, you know, my boss was going to send me to your wellness summit, and I'm really struggling convincing him to come because we get the afternoon off. And I said, really? It's a wellness summit. We are chock full all morning long. You're working your tail off. We want to give you a few hours off in the afternoon so you can go biking, hiking, play golf, go shopping, whatever you want to do. It's a wellness summit. We're supposed to focus on ourselves and then taking some time off. And she had to come back to me and said, well, I'll do my best to try to convince him. But she couldn't convince him. And she had to pull out of our summit because her boss will not support her. We hear this time and time again from these young women coming in through scholarship programs that they couldn't afford to come to any of these programs without financial funding. You know, at Funeral Women Lead, we're doing our best to recruit and bring in more funds so we can lower our costs every year and to be in the future provide scholarships for young women to attend. But first, we are building an army of women who want to come together to support women because the support systems are not yet there. If you look at the statistics, the ones we can find, you have about a 76% membership in the National Funeral Directors Association are male. The rest are female, and of those, a little over 20% are females in management or in ownership of that smaller 24% membership. ICCFA hasn't reported yet what their male-female mix is, but we're still not seeing women in leadership roles as much as we would like to. We've done some national research. For the first time, NFDA is going to have its first woman president since it was founded in the 1880s. ICCFA has had about 4 to 5 women, chairman of their board, president of their boards. CANA has had a couple as well, but the numbers are small. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're working moms. We're still raising kids, a lot of these young women are, and they don't have either the time or the ability or the support to get more involved in these associations. And we hope to help them with all of that as well. You know, giving them ideas and support. I was listening to someone talking to a young woman the other day, and she was trying to figure out how to get her 4-year-old daughter dressed to go to school, or was it 6-year-old daughter? And because the daughter had all these choices she wanted to make in her outfits and could never decide, she goes, okay, well, here's what you do. You hang out 3 outfits the night before. That's it. You get agreement. She wakes up the next morning, though one of those 3 is going on your body before we walk out the door to go to school. You know, to be together with another mom that can give you tips like that. I mean, maybe it's not something that everyone goes through, but I can remember the quarrels and the upsetness that I don't want to wear that in the morning. And you've got a funeral at 10 o'clock and you've got to be there at 8 a.m. to get ready for it, whether it's in the cemetery or the funeral home. You know, you're trying to haul these children out the door to school and you're like, they can't decide on clothes. Silly examples, but real life experiences where women are not feeling supported and need more support and help and guidance.
Melissa, what do you see in terms of, because you work with a lot of cemeteries and it's not always the top person you're talking to, you might be talking to the head of a sales operation or a marketing team. Do you feel like there's a need for this kind of help or togetherness across the board in all of those types of jobs?
Yes, absolutely. Whether it's someone working in the office of a cemetery, whether it's someone that, you know, gets out and shows families and takes them on tours, it's someone actually working on grounds even. I mean, we have a woman that is in our grounds crew at one of our locations, and she does such a fabulous job, but she is that kind of soul person, and there is a need for camaraderie. And definitely, you know, to have these kind of conversations that Lisa mentioned. But I have to say, as we step forward and we join together more and we support one another, people are watching. And it's the people that we don't think are watching. For example, I just had this happen personally the other day. My daughter is a freshman in college this year, and she's never expressed interest to me about wanting to be in any aspect of the funeral service. She's in a gender performance class, and they have to do some kind of capstone project with research. And she came to me the other day and she said, Mom, I think the perfect project would be to do something about women in funeral service. And I also heard her say on the phone to someone else, and she didn't know I was hearing this, I think I would really like to own a funeral home one day. You know, but it's those people are watching us, and you referenced, Tom, you know, a moment in history, a historical moment, and it was, you know, kind of small maybe, but in the end, I think we are at a very pivotal moment. And so we must be there for each other, no matter if we're on the cemetery side of things, the mortuary side of things. We need to drop those barriers and join together to support one another. And as we do, I think it will benefit not only our profession, but the people who are coming to be served by the people in our profession. It will benefit our families. You asked a bit ago something about, I forgot what the question was, but and it kind of led into women supporting each other. But I think there are specific things that we bring to families who are coming to talk with us, whether they're talking about buying property in a cemetery or they're coming to plan their funeral at a funeral home. There's a certain way that women, and I kind of hate to put everybody in a box, but there is something about women and the way that they tend to listen and respond to people. That's probably why we've been given the opportunity to bear children somewhat. But, you know, it is something in there that's like nurturing, and that carries over to the families that we serve. So whether they want more personalization options, they want, you know, opportunities to do things differently. If you look at who our vendors are in our spaces, those forward-thinking vendors are often now led or co-led by women. And I've noticed that more and more at the conventions and things that I've attended.
Yeah. There's starting to be more and more role models. Our senior vice president of sales and operations was a woman at Baue's, and she helped us take many of our acres and be able to develop them into these beautiful vignettes and gardens and cremation niche areas. Her creativity that she brought to the table was amazing, and she's still doing it today now on a more regional, national level. And then she started hiring more and more in the sales team and the development team, and it just turns out almost all of them are women. Not on purpose, that's who came to the table. And we're finding that they do need the support, but they also need to be listened to. You know, Robin, I'm sure you came with many ideas back 13, 14 years ago. You know, were they all listened to, and what kind of challenges did you have with your board, you know, with your creative ideas? I'm sure that was a big challenge for you. I think we need to open the doors to help employers become more open-minded, to listen to the ideas. The creativity is there, and it's not that men don't have it, Tom. Many do, but you have to draw it out. And you need to join as a team and support each other. And we're seeing that starting to happen more and more. It is not necessarily the majority. I would say from what we've been able to tell without any national research we can do at this point, there's about 10% of the employers out there that are really open to diverse genders and populations in their hiring practices. They're more open to flexibility. They believe in developing their people, and they'll send them to these conferences so they can become better educated. The majority that we talk to are not being supported. They don't have the scholarship programs available. They won't even let them, most of them have to take their own PTO to be able to just leave to come to a conference. They're not being given any time, business time, paid time off. It's really kind of sad. So I've talked quite a bit, but I think we have a national crisis when you look at the top 3 things that owners will tell you they need help with. One of the top 3 is hiring. You know, they can't find good people. I hear it time and time again from all these owners and regional managers. We can't find good people. Well, the women are there. They're applying. What are you doing as an organization to help hire them, develop them, train them, and mold them to become the future leaders of tomorrow? And that's one of the things that we believe at Funeral Women Lead is part of our responsibility to help with, because employers are busy. They don't all have time to develop women as leaders. And our dean of our leadership academy is an amazing woman. She coaches, she develops leaders, and she's going to have a whole online program that will kick off in person in November. She'll be with the students all year to help them grow themselves as leaders. And then after year 1, if they want to stay for year 2, they'll go down the path of learning to manage or learning to own a business. And that's where we hope to bring in instructors, someone of Robin's qualifications, Melissa's, to help teach these women, how do you manage people? How do you manage a cemetery? What do you do in a crisis when you're low staffed? How do you pick that up? Because I think we all need additional training and leadership development. That's what we're hearing they need, and we're going to try to help them with that.
Well, and I wanted to go back to something Melissa said about with sales, you know, and women having unique skills to this. You know, from what I understand and what I've seen out in the field, literally, is that women are driving a lot of these cemetery purchase decisions. You know, I don't know how many times I've heard a husband say, "Honey, I don't care," or the wife just taking the lead. And there's something, you know, I always say being a cemeterian is like being a matchmaker. You find the right space, you know, when you get to know these people, and you know, you're driving the little golf cart around, and you try to find the right space that gives them the peace they need if they're pre-planning or at need. But you know, you see these women, and especially maybe especially in a loss situation, I do feel like we are uniquely positioned to help somebody. Not that a man can't do it, but to help somebody in that position. And women look to other women at times, sometimes like this, I think. And I have really enjoyed those moments of connection with women coming in to purchase property. You know, it was something that I didn't really expect. I didn't know about how to really run a cemetery when I got this job. And so it's those kind of moments that you realize, wow, like I'm in the right spot, and I can continue to develop these skills to serve families. And that's where I think a lot of people don't really understand the funeral industry when they look at it from the outside. It's a service, and it is such an honor to work with these families in this time of need. Or, you know, do I have a blast when I'm with a pre-need family and they're like, can you take our picture laying down? Sure. You know, if you need to lay down on your grave space to put it on your Christmas card, that's fine. You know, but so it is, you build that relationship. And I always say to families when they buy property, well, welcome to the neighborhood, you know, now you're kind of stuck with me, you know. And so it's that building of the rapport and meeting with families, and that I just find so fascinating and so rewarding. And I just wish more women understood the real benefit of being in this industry, for in this, as to serve others. But also we bring a lot to the table when it comes to these difficult times. And it's for 14 years, I've been shocked every day by how rewarding it is, how much hard work it is, but how rewarding it is, and how women, we help lead families through these challenging times. But women are driving these decisions. So it's important that they see other women helping them do it.
That's a really good point.
Robin, because you're, in cemetery specific space, and we hear so much about funeral stuff, do you anecdotally feel like there is any kind of wave of women coming up in cemetery space?
You know, I don't really know about a lot of our, what I would consider our local competitors, but there are women. I know that there are women at the cemeteries nearby. But I do see, when we host community events and programs, and we're often asked about internships now, but sometimes it's internships about our arboretum or internships about our archives. So it's hard to know, really where those folks are going to fall, because we do play such an educational role in our community. But I try to connect with other, female funeral cemetery staff. But most of us in my little peer group are very small. We're like, most of my staff are outside people. I don't even have a secretary, so we're small. So it's hard for me to know besides what I read, in American Cemetery Magazine, things like that, just because most of my peers are folks that are not huge staffs. I mean, I have friends at Laurel Hill, but most of I have also just a small little tiny staff, so it's hard to know what else is out there. I'm a little bit in a bubble at times, I think, because of our structure here.
I've found a great number of women are very interested lately in cemetery history and writing about it, and that is definitely something that shows up. And like Melissa said, at conventions now, some of the ancillary businesses, you're seeing a lot that are women-run, ideas and innovators. It's pretty cool. I want to take you guys on a terrible little time trip. You mentioned American Cemetery Magazine, which it was known as. We added cremation, I think, in the year 2000 or something. But this is from a 1975 article. I was able to go through our stacks this summer. And this was the 1975 article. It was a cover story. You'll love the title. How to manage women counselors. Okay. This was written by a woman, and this is just a little excerpt from it. Will they disrupt his office? Will he have to change the type of meetings he holds? Clean up his language? First thing he knows, she will start bringing in potted plants, maybe even ruffled curtains. So begrudgingly, because he was told to start hiring women, he's searching for someone who looks like a woman, thinks like a man, acts like a lady, and works like a dog. So if you want to say how far we've come as a society, you can see things like that. And the hope is that those type of attitudes are well in the past. I know more than one of you has said you still see You know, some evidence of the old network of ideas, the old network of thinking of, you know, oh, can she handle this kind of thing? But do you feel like, you know, looking ahead 10 years, that we'll look back to now and see some things that we could have gotten so much better? I'm sure that's part of the aim of something like Funeral Women Lead, but is that something you can see in the future, us kind of looking back and not seeing those kind of attitudes anywhere close in the rearview mirror?
Oh, I feel like I'm already seeing major shifts. I've seen it in my own life. I mean, I love my dear dad, but he was the one that said, and can remember my grandparents, even my grandmother, who was a licensed funeral director, saying negative things about women in funeral service. But it was also my dad who saw the potential in me and invited me into the space. I think, you know, while I don't like that it's this way, we are at a moment that's really important that we be aware of what precedents we're setting. What is the work that we're putting in? And yes, maybe it requires a little bit more on some levels. And is that fair? No, but that's the reality. We are being asked in some ways to prove ourselves. And I don't think we should take that casually. I think it can be seen as an opportunity, and it doesn't always have to be seen as a negative for us. And we have so much capability. Let's just let it shine and support one another and not fraction ourselves off into many splinter groups and all these things, but come together to support one another. That's really what Funeral Women Lead is about. We're not trying to compete with anyone else. We just are trying to be a hub to help people come together. And that's what's so needed. So whether that's in the cemetery space, the funeral home space, again, I want us to try to drop those barriers, and we are here together to support one another. And yes, I think that we've already made big strides. Are there more strides to make? Absolutely. But yes, in 10 years, I think we'll look back and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe we came from that. And look where we're at now.
And I brought a potted plant when I started. There was nothing in this office. I brought a potted plant.
What is so bad about potted plants? I don't even know. Why would that be?
I don't know. Flowers, I have basic flowers going every day in my home, in my office. You know, it's a girl thing maybe, but we love flowers in our flower gardens. I let the women loose at our cemetery on helping design the gardens. I had them let them loose on, you know, helping us with the uniforms and the colors that we wear, so we all match. And I mean, it's fabulous to see what they can create. Interesting situation about women coming together. I want to go down that road with Melissa, because I think what you said is so true. That's one of our goals at Funeral Women Lead, is to collaborate with all organizations that support women. And all the proceeds from my book sales, as well as what we raise, we will be using to support women from all parts of our profession: funeral, death care, cemetery, cremation, death doulas, terramation, aquamation, you name it, whatever, green burial, wherever women are coming in, we want to help meet them in those spaces. At the Southern Cemetery Cremation and Funeral Association meeting this summer, we had a little booth, and we joined together with Death Care Collective, and we had a little reception that we hosted. And for the first time, we have a photograph. I think it's on one of our social media platforms, where we have NFDA, ICCFA, CANA, DCC, Funeral Women Lead, and Southern Cemetery, all represented, cemeterians, all represented together as a group of women. Because we get along, we collaborate. Doesn't matter what your role is, where you come from, what you do. We're there for a common theme of supporting each other in our career journey and our life journey in this, as we work in this profession. And I think it's super important to remember that there may be other groups. I'm hearing some things like, everybody wants to do a women's program now, right? It's like, great, that's awesome. That's what you need to do then. We're going to help the states grow their program for women, because we've got to reach out into the front lines more, Tom, to let the women know that there's a place that will support them, that we have resources for them. If you want to connect with someone in your home state, if you want to connect with someone who's in a particular part of the profession to learn more. That's what we hope to do, is we collaborate with all the different associations and organizations.
That's great. I wanted to ask this. You know, there's always a thing when you're uplifting that somebody might feel put down or left out, you know. In the case of talking about a women's group or organizations, and you sound very inclusive to even other groups and other people, but whether it's men or just somebody who formed a different style group, you know, how important is it to say, listen, we're open to everything else. We're open to men as mentors. You know, it's not like we've not gotten valuable mentorship from men in our lives and so forth. You know, is that a point that you like to make, or any of you think about when talking about uplifting without leaving someone feeling like you're, you know, this is just kind of a bull session where you're tearing down, you know, something that other people like?
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to invite everyone into the space. Yes, our focus is on women, but any way that people can support. I was talking to a funeral director from Washington State. It was back at one of the conventions we've been to this year. I can't remember which one, but I just had mentioned about Funeral Women Lead. And he said, what can I do to support? I've got all these female directors. I want to connect them with people. You know, we invite them to do that. I mean, I think it would be great to have someone step in and help us mentor that is maybe not a woman, you know, but to show the support behind it. You know, we're here with you. We want to join the conversation. That's what this is all about, is inviting people to join the conversation.
exactly. And a lot of my mentors, Tom, most of my mentors, except for very select women, because there weren't many of them back in the 80s, were all men. Through association work that I met as I traveled, and I was connected by others to some really great men that really helped me grow my family business, because I had no idea what I was doing. You know, I came in like Robin, clueless, and I was a funeral director. That's what I knew how to do. And it's important, a lot of our coaches and mentors and people that have offered to help are men, and that are financially supporting our organization as well, and they want to help be teachers. And there's others who say to us, well, teach me how to better develop women. I need to understand how to do that more. One of the owners I talked to at Cana just this last week said, what more do you have for all my women that you can provide? Will you come in and do a program? Well, we're in our infancy. This is our first year. We're still figuring out what we can do, but what I can tell them is we will be having educational webinars and seminars online that all women can access, and men as well, so that we can help all of us together develop this future generation of leaders, because that's who we're seeing coming into the space. They are the majority, and they need to feel supported and well educated.
You know, and I think young women are doing a very good job on social media. There are a lot of young funeral directors who I mean, I don't obviously see all of them, and I don't know if all of them are great, but the ones I have seen really kind of showing what their job is, you know, showing their successes, their challenges. And I think it's just great to see that in a free space that people can learn about the field, and they're controlling their own narrative, and that there's some inherent dangers in that, of course. But there are some young women who I think other young women are looking up to. And so an organization like Lisa and Melissa's to formalize that is so important, because these young women are starting that conversation of showing their challenges, their successes in the death industry, but then taking the next step to continue to educate themselves. You know, it's one thing to see a 30-second TikTok. It's another thing to understand this is what you're going to do next. These are going to be the hard things. This is how we're going to be there for each other, is so important. But it's a pivotal time in the industry, I think, because people are seeing these things on social media, and they may want to learn more. But we're all in it together. That's what I constantly say to the other females in the local areas. Hey, we're in this together. You know, we understand this, and we're here to support each other. And when I'm going through a tough time and a female funeral director says that to me, I think, oh, you know, she gets it. And that's really important. We're at this pivotal time where more women are getting into this field, like you said, Tom, but also are going to need to realize that there are some real challenges and some real amazing points, but we do all need to be in it together.
Ultimately, in my thought, and having heard you all speak, it's about validation, and reinforcement. How important it was at some point in your career, somebody validated your career choice or an idea you had for something new within the space or, at your company. And that's huge. If you don't get that validation, you're kind of in a wilderness wondering if you're going the right way. And you get plenty of negative validation, in your own head a lot of the times, especially. So having people who've been through these things, I think it's amazing. It's been wonderful talking to you three and getting this perspective, especially because there isn't a lot out there cemetery specific. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to let Lisa give one more shout out to her book, and anything else. If Robin or Melissa are beating any particular drums you'd like to mention, let us know.
There you go. Well, we're dedicating this book to all the women and mentors and those that really help support not just me, but my entire team at Baue. They were amazing in just helping us grow our company. But all the proceeds from our book will be going to Funeral Women Lead and other charitable organizations that support women in the death care space. So that's important to know. The proceeds, this is one of our fundraisers as well. It will be launched and online and available on September 3rd. And if you would like to go to and see our live streaming of the book launch, it's from 4 to 6 p.m. It's going to be held at Baue's in St. Charles at Cave Springs. And you go on our website at funeralwomenlead.org, as well as lisabaue.com. And you can join our little book launch and come see us. But go online, buy this book, help us support women. That's really important. We'll be at NFDA. We will be at ICCFA again next year with our book. We'll be at selected independent funeral homes, and we just came from Cana. So the book will be around for a while, and we're trying to raise some money to provide more scholarships for women to help them be educated, developed in the future as leaders. So thanks for having us on, Tom. Appreciate you.
You bet. Thanks. And I feel blessed that I was there for a little bit of history and
last year. Yeah, you didn't buy us a drink though. What was up with that? We should have asked for more, right, Melissa?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was funny. I didn't even know anybody was watching. So somebody's always watching. And I think that is an important part too of what our conversation has been about today. I mean, Robin brought it up, people don't know the possibilities. So having something like this, having this opportunity to talk together, thank you, Tom, for that, because you're also planning the possibilities for others.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies, once again, and I hope to talk to you again soon.